Welcome, ladies and gentlemen of the pod, to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about those scandalous Bridgertons and the scheming Featheringtons and the handsome Duke of Hastings. I'm your host, Lady Whistlerow.
And I'm Lady Lilith.
And I am Lady Savannah.
And today, we're going to... see, I went into Cockney, didn't I?
I was going to, like, Australian, sort of. Yeah.
And today, we'll be talking about Bridgerton.
It's in family. Was that good?
That was A1. That was brilliant. I loved it.
Okay, Lilith, you do it. Go for it.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Female Dating Strategy Podcast. I am your host, Lady Lilith, and I'm here with my guests,
Lady Whistlerow
and Lady Savannah.
And today we will be talking about... Oh, fuck, I can't do the accent.
And today we'll be talking about Bridgerton.
Anyways, no more accents. Okay. Today we're going to be talking about Bridgerton. Woo! Okay.
Woo-woo. So the hot and scandalous new show on Netflix, and we're going to see how did everybody feel about it? Because I'm going to give you my initial reaction, and then you guys tell me what you think. Initial reaction, I actually really love the show. It's pure Shonda Rimes, right? It's got the complicated female characters, no heroes, no real villains, complex storytelling. And I know she adapted and already, I know they changed some things for the show itself, and she adapted a text from a book, but I think it really had a very Shonda Rimes feel to it.
Yeah. Should I give my initial reaction to Bridgerton?
Yeah, initial reaction.
Okay, so yes, it was very Shonda Rimes. However, I hated the characters so much. Like the whole time, and this is not like Shonda Rimes. This is like whoever wrote the book. Mm-hmm. That's their fault. And I absolutely hated Simon. I hated Daphne.
I didn't like Simon either.
Yeah. The whole time I was watching it, I'm like screaming because like Daphne is like, why would you go for the fuckboy when there's like Prince Frederick right there? He seems like such a you two have like the same goals. You both want to have a family. Why are you going to go for the guy that's like, doesn't want to have kids? If you want kids, like just doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah. There's some problematic themes in the show, which I think we should dissect a little bit for sure. What about you, Savannah?
So initial impressions was that it was really well made. I thought it was very true to the era. But I didn't really I guess this was a symptom of older society, but just the whole idea that women have to be picked.
Oh, for
was
sure.
Just nah, sis, for me.
The whole system is a pick-me system, and it's going to be complicated because we're going to try to talk about this show while ignoring that it's basically female sexual slavery, where they're just auctioning off these girls to whatever old man wants them. You know, it's kind of gross when you think about really what's happening in the nitty gritty of that. But I think there's enough themes in the show to make it a salvageable show worth viewing and discussing.
Yeah, I think there's interesting themes to dissect. Although I will say that I'm kind of a historical costume nerd sort of person. I'm really interested in historical fashion history, and it just drove me crazy. They're using machine embroidery, and the there's so many of the costumes that to me were just
it looks too perfect.
Because back then they didn't have machine embroidery. You'd be making embroidery by hand. You wouldn't have the whole dress be embroidered. You'd have it in certain, strategic areas, right? Mm-hmm. So that just that was just something that just drove me crazy the whole time I was watching it. But other than that, I'd say it was. Oh, and the hair and makeup and stuff. Yeah, that was also more modern.
The makeup, and then the fact that they were using modern music. I think they had a bunch of Ariana Grande songs that they then put to classical music.
They had Thank You Next playing in the background, which I thought was very appropriate for that scene. So, yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it overall, but there are some elements to it that I think we should talk about. I think I'll start on, let's discuss who your favorite character was. Either your favorite character, meaning I love the energy of this character, or your favorite character to hate, where you're just looking at them every time you come on the screen, you just remind me of something negative, right? So to kick that off, I think that my favorite character is Lady Featherington. And she's somewhat controversial because they definitely set her up to be the villain early on. So in the first couple of episodes, you see her and she's kind of a gossip and a busybody, and she's very short with people. And she seems really, I mean, she's just like all of them, but she's very, very obsessed with trying to get her daughters married off well. And one of the things that she does, or one of the things that makes her an unlikable character, is when she's charged with taking in her niece or her husband's niece, Marina, she's very kind of dismissive and a little bit cruel to her because she doesn't like that Marina's drawing more attention from suitors than her daughters are. So she's kind of like acting like, oh, this girl's in our way and she's a burden. And that kind of makes her seem like very jealous and petty. Where I think she ends up kind of redeeming herself later on is when it's revealed that Marina's pregnant. Spoiler alert for everybody. This is a spoiler full episode. So if you haven't actually watched the show, then watch it, then come back and listen to this. But she finds out Marina's pregnant. And then you kind of see her make a lot of tough choices to kind of get Marina to understand that she's got to make tough choices, right? So the backstory in that is Marina comes to their family. Marina's pregnant. Marina got pregnant by, I think, a boy that lived near her farm and went off to war. So the whole show, she's writing this guy letters. You know, she doesn't hear back from him and finds out she's pregnant. And Lady Featherington finds out she's pregnant because she never has her period in the entire time that she's there. So Lady Featherington to me, like, as unlikable as she was for the first couple episodes, like towards the middle, you're like, this woman's actually very smart and kind of a boss, because she basically is the one that comes back to Marina and is like, sis,
he's not texting you back. Okay.
He's not coming back. Right. Exactly. And I'm thinking, like, if she came to us and I was in that position to help her, and I was like, we would give her that FDS hard lesson too. Like, do you know how many boys out here say they love you just to get in your pants, sis? Like, he ain't coming back. He hasn't written you back. And it's been months. You're holding on to a pipe dream and you're not paying attention to all the suitors in front of you who could potentially give you a much better situation than this guy anyways, because I think he wasn't very rich as well, if he's the soldier.
He was like a soldier. He was poor, right? So she's saying, like, you have an opportunity to marry up who could give you a much better life, right?
Yeah, right in front of you, for that matter, versus this guy who she's holding on to who didn't know what's going on with him. So I'm going to tell you where I felt like, yes, queen. When she took her to that alleyway where you saw all the very, very poor people, and she's like, girl, if you don't get your shit together and get some of this rich dick while it's free and available to you, you might end up destitute with you and your child, right? And I was kind of like, you know what? This is like a hard lesson to learn, but it's real, you know?
And even in that scene, Lady Featherington was portrayed as like, oh, you're like classist because, you know, you're saying, oh, look at these, like, you know, poor people, you could end up like them. Marina says something like, oh, all I'm seeing are like good, hardworking people. And Marina almost is portrayed as like the good person in that scene. And Featherington is portrayed as like the bad guy or the villain. I don't see it that way. I think she's a realist. Like, you know, it's not, they're literally living in a society that is classist. Like, you have to be realistic about the world that you're living in, right?
Yeah, they don't say anything about her having any type of education or anything that or even a skill that makes us feel like she could support herself on her own. So it kind of comes across as like, it just comes across like we're watching this slow moving train wreck where she rejects all the suitors. And then I guess she was hidden away for a while, but then it's like she doesn't advocate on her own behalf because she's spending so much time pining away from this guy who she cannot even get a letter back from. And we're just like, oh my God. But there was definitely a pivot after they had that conversation, and you could see, the pivot actually happened when Lady Featherington, which was a little bit cruel, but she forges a letter from Marina's boyfriend, George, saying that basically, I'm not going to see you anymore. And she justifies it by saying, you know what, this is for her own good. She's got to learn about men sooner or later. And it's better she learns sooner while she's not showing, so we can get her married off. And, you know, she can cry about this later, right? Like, she's basically like, you can mourn the loss of this love later. Like, right now, we got to get you somewhere where you can be set up and be taken care of.
And in those days, it was very much like, you get married or you're a prostitute or you starve to death. Like, women didn't, there wasn't,
right.
Even if she did have an education or skills, it would be irrelevant because, you know, unless you were straight up like working class and we're going to be like a washerwoman or something like that, or a servant, which, you know, that's a whole other discussion. But for a lot of women, yeah, like.
But she was a single mother. Like, it's different from being working class and at least married to being a full-on single mother.
Like, she was in a very dire situation. And I'm sure these sorts of situations happened all the time, you know, before safe and legal abortion was the thing that women had access to. So I see Lady Featherington as like a realist in that sort of situation. And also, even her wanting to marry off her own daughters, like, good. You know, she wants to marry her daughter. She wants her daughters to marry well. She knows that this is a dire situation for them, right? And women are very often portrayed as like bad or vain or sinful or somehow for wanting to advance their own interests.
Advocate on their own behalf.
And to advocate for their daughters, right? But that's something you have to do, like, as a mother. So I don't see her as a villain at all for that. I think she was just doing her job.
Well, and then contrast her between Daphne's mother, Lady Bridgerton, who just kind of, like, she lets Anthony run the show. And I guess because he's the elder of all of them, he kind of
fucking hate Anthony. I'll get to that in a sec, but I hate Anthony.
But yeah, we'll get to Anthony. So, right. So she lets Anthony run the show, and she doesn't tell Daphne anything about marriage or how to handle men. And so part of the drama towards the end of the season is because Daphne's learning in quick succession all these things that perhaps her mother should have clued her in on as far as marriage and sex. Versus, I think Lady Featherington would have never let her daughters go in a situation like that ignorant, right? So I'm like, when you look at the contrast between, okay, yes, Daphne's beautiful and pretty and innocent and has, like, you know, a pleasant, high posh demeanor, but she's also completely unequipped for the job. Like, she makes a ton of missteps because no one really gives her a clue on her family about what kinds of things are expected of her and you know, unpleasant things at times, or that's going to be expected of her as a wife and a mother.
Yeah. And I thought that Lady Bridgerton just totally, did not prepare her daughters at all for the reality of marriage. She was just going on about like, oh, like Bridgerton's marry for love, and like, you know, you'll find a man that you love, and blah, 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 blah. And I feel like she just wasn't being realistic with Daphne.
She wasn't being honest.
Yeah, she wasn't being honest with her about the reality of what it's like to be a woman in this world.
And so that kind of brings us to the more controversial portion of what Lady Featherington ultimately decided with Marina, which was that they were going to scheme to seduce Colin Bridgerton and try to get him to have sex with her so that they could plausibly pass the baby off as Colin's, right? Which was like, ooh, escandalo, right? Which causes Penelope, aka Lady Whistledown, to freak out and then betray her friend and reveal the fact that Marina is pregnant in her.
I thought Penelope was kind of a dick for that. Like,
yeah. I mean, that's Shonda. Like, she always undermines characters so they're never totally good, which I think is great overall, because it shows you how you can all the missteps that they make in places where people could advocate for themselves, even while they're being wronged or victimized. And I think it kind of gives you a lot of complex lessons to think about. So I enjoy her writing from that perspective. But what did you guys think of that plot?
I mean, the whole time watching Bridgerton, I felt uneasy because of, like the reproductive coercion stuff. Like Simon and Daphne, for example, she just like rides his dick and doesn't let him pull out because she like just forces him to like impregnate her, right?
I'm like, but that was gonna happen. Like, okay, so she shouldn't have forced him, but there was no way he was pulling out for 20 years.
Yeah,
right. Was he going to pull out for the entire 20 years of like that she's fertile?
Yeah.
There was no way, right?
And also, pull-out method is like the worst like contraception. Like she would have gotten like there's pre-cum, okay? She would have gotten pregnant eventually. But yeah, so then the whole like baby trapping theme, like I don't know, I don't know how I feel about those kinds of plot lines because it's just playing into that trope of like how do I say this? Like women are doing this out of necessity because of the world that they live in, and they're being portrayed as evil for trying to make the best of an already shit situation.
Right. I mean, it's they're trying to create an advantageous situation in an oppressive system, right? I feel like if you look at it from the perspective that they're existing in an oppressive system, so, you know, when you look at Lady Featherington and her ruthless practicality, it's kind of hard to be mad at her because I'm kind of like, well, yeah, because men set the system up for women to fail. So it's hard for me to feel bad for them because you're looking at this from the perspective it's either this or she get married off to some old, disgusting old man. There was some other suitor that was looking at her and he was clearly old, like in his 50s, 60s, 70s. He was disgusting, right? And so the options for her was marry this disgusting old man and basically be raped, like, you know, by some guy she clearly is not attracted to, or try to baby trap Colin. And I'm like, well, that's clearly the better option, right?
Baby trap Colin.
And that's exactly it. Like people will be like, oh, you should have just done the right thing and married some old geezer. But what is the right thing? Like the right thing in this situation is the one has the least harmful effect on men and like the most harmful effect on women, right?
Right.
I don't really blame women.
You're talking about 40 years of that, right? 40 years of, I mean, not even having sex, like being sexually assaulted by a disgusting old man. Like that to me is the reality of that. That's kind of the reality they always gloss over whenever they do these period pieces and they marry a woman off to these gross old men. It's not just that it's gross. It's that it's literally repulsive and you're going to have to either be assaulted and cry yourself to sleep every night. Right.
Yeah. Like I'm watching a different show, Z, The Beginning of Everything, which is about Scott Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda, who we should totally talk about in a different episode because this is a great show. But there's this one scene where Zelda, who's already had sex, by the way, but her older sister is telling her, there's something about marriage I need you to know. Whenever your husband wants you to do your wifely duties, just like lie back and imagine the garden and it'll be over with soon. Like that is what like women were told about sex at this time, like that you're not supposed to enjoy it, that you have to do it for your husband. Like I'm just thinking about how many times women got married and every single time they had sex it was basically rape.
Yeah, it's gross, right? And you're just listening to it like, yeah, you know what, if I was in her position I think that would obviously be the better option. And I think Lady Featherington was a real one. I think she was an absolute boss in that scene where she was like, girl, if you could pull this off, you better hurry it up. Like she was just basically so supportive. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's why ultimately, even though she kind of comes across negatively at first, and it does seem like the show was trying to set her up as the villain, I actually think she's the realist and the kind of cruel to be kind type that I think sometimes FDS, the role that sometimes FDS plays and why sometimes we get called mean. And I'm like, yeah, but we're also like, trying to help you win right now, right?
You know, and I think just like Lady Featherington, it's also FDS is about being, pragmatic and understanding the situation that you're in, especially as women where we are already disadvantaged in so many ways. And I think people, especially when it comes from women, when a guy is pragmatic, he's seen as, logical, a boss, he's on top, he's, he's competent. But when a woman is being pragmatic and bases her actions based on the environment that she's in, she's manipulative or she's scheming.
Right. It's never like, oh, she's a strategy genius, right? I would look at it like she's a strategic genius, right? This is a person who has looked at the obstacles, looked at what's in front of her, and she's creating a way for herself.
Oh, and the other thing to remember with Featherington is like the whole reason why she's in that situation is because of her piece of shit husband's gambling.
Right.
Okay.
Let's not forget about that. You are so right. The fact that he like gambled all their savings away and he had to take on all these extra burdens to pay his debts is the reason why Lady Featherington is in pretty much all the situations of that season, because he even tried to block one of the suitors of one of their daughters because of some debts. So it's like all her problems are caused by her terrible husband.
Exactly. Like, she is trying to do the best that she can given a shitty situation. The whole reason why Marina was even there was because he owed some guy a favor. Like, that was his way of paying off a debt, was by hosting Marina for that season or whatever. So yeah, like, most of their problems were Lord Featherington's fault.
Right.
So she's really just trying to do the best with what she has.
So she was my favorite character. So what was your favorite character to love or hate?
I'm trying to think. I liked Eloise, probably just because I like personally relate with her the most. But I really hated Daphne. I really hated Simon. Yeah, there's so many moments where Daphne, I'm like, you're such a fucking dumb bitch. I'm sorry. like there was this one scene where she's like, are you saying just because I'm a woman, I don't have choices? Yes, bitch.
Yeah, she was definitely liberal feminist like bait at that moment. Because I remember, now I'm my memory's jogging, and I remember that scene too, and having the exact same reaction. Like, I can make choices on my own, and I'm like, you don't even know what sex is or how sex works. How are you going to go out there and face the political complications, and you don't know how babies are made, sis? Like, it was kind of, to me, the perfect example of her standing up for herself in all the wrong ways. This is a time where you need to listen to people who have way more insight than you.
And it was just so almost tone deaf to her own experience. Like, her brother literally, he basically scared her away from suitors, and she's talking about having choices as a woman. It's just like, do you not see the cognitive dissonance there?
Yeah, so like, a couple of things. One, women at that time would have not even like thought twice about the fact that as women they don't have choices. Like at the time it's just obvious, right? Like, they would not have thought twice about the fact that like their options are limited because they're women. That's just a fact. They wouldn't have ever said something like, oh, just because I'm a woman, you're saying I don't have choices? Fucking obviously, okay? So secondly, she reminds me a lot of like liberal feminists who are like, oh, it's my choice to do this. Like, you know, the choosy choice feminism kind of thing. But like you said, Daphne doesn't even know what sex is, right?
Right.
So it reminds me of these, like, you know, the Teen Vogue articles about like how to engage in BDSM. You're teaching like 16, 17-year-olds how to do BDSM. Like, they're fucking kids. They're young. Like, they don't know what's going on. Even when you turn 18, it's not like you suddenly have the world figured out when you turn 18, right? So the idea of like consent and choices are like meaningless when you're talking about someone who doesn't have the information that they need to make good choices.
Right. And she screws up a couple of times because of that, because she accidentally insulted all the townspeople when she didn't pick a pig to slaughter. And then they were all mad at her. Right. So I was like, that's a perfect example of where she tried to make a decision as, oh, well, I'm the Duchess now, so I'm going to make decisions and I'm going to say none of these pigs are getting slaughtered. But then they're like, well, this is actually important for you to do because this is how we feed our families. So
yeah, it's very tone deaf and it also shows like the privilege, right? Like,
yeah,
they're like, she's so privileged and like tone deaf and doesn't understand the struggles of ordinary people and how her decisions impact, like, yeah, how her decisions affect them. And like, she's thinking about like, oh, I just want to be nice and fair and like, you know, la-di-da. And like, she's living in this fantasy world, right? And it just comes across as like insulting to people who are actually affected by it.
So Daphne's like the secret villain of the show because she's basically a liberal feminist. She's the choosy choice feminist that wants to stand up for herself and look amazing and makes all the wrong decisions and does all the self-sabotaging behavior. And
loves to virtue signal, but doesn't actually know what she's talking about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. She is kind of an easy character to dislike for that reason.
Yeah. And the other character I hated was Anthony. Okay. The whole time I was watching it, I'm thinking this beady-eyed motherfucker is evil. Okay. The whole time I'm watching it, I just hated every scene he was in. He's just so like, it almost felt incestuous, his like obsession with cock blocking his sister. It just felt creepy as fuck. And to go online and realize that apparently everyone's like, oh my God, Anthony's so cute and so funny. Tee-hee, he's just protective. What? Like, other people are liking him? Like, no, every scene he was in, I hated him. Why do people like this guy?
I more or less liked him only because I thought, okay, he has eldest child syndrome. So I didn't get like evil from him, more so that there's insane amounts of responsibility on him. And so that pressure makes him have to make choices that he doesn't love, but also he's kind of a ruthless cut to the chase guy because he's more or less like the weight of everything falls on him, which makes him very, very short-sighted. And of course, I think he's the one that also tried to get Daphne to marry Burbrook, who was like that creepy incel dude.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing that drove me crazy, that he was trying to forced marriage his sister to marry some ugly guy. Basically my reason for that was he's just so uncomfortable with the idea. Like, he's so uncomfortable with the idea of his sister having sex and enjoying it that he's going to force her to marry someone that she doesn't want to have sex with, and like not caring at all about what she wants. Yeah.
I didn't even get that he thought about that. I think he was just strictly logical. This is a perfect logical match, and not taking in the love and passion part of it. But to me, it seemed more of a projection of his inability, because he had that complicated relationship with Sienna, right? Because he wants to be with that opera singer, but he can't because he's got to marry a woman of a certain status as an eldest son, right? So I got that. I got the controlling thing on his sister, sort of a projection of him trying to control himself because he can't. And even the mother calls him out in a scene, right? There's a scene where the mother comes to Anthony, is basically calling him out for trying to scare away some of the suitors that Daphne likes and saying, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, well, these aren't suitable matches for her and she can do better. And then the mother comes back at him like, well, don't think we don't know about your little side piece, right? Over on the other side of town. And that fact that, you're right now projecting your desire to control yourself onto Daphne, right? Because you can't control yourself and you can't be with the person you love. You're making her miserable.
Yeah. And his whole relationship with the opera singer was like, just made me so angry. Like, it was so mean to her. like, I'm going to take care of you forever. And then, I can't see you again. And just like hot and cold and breadcrumbing her, basically.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
What people nowadays would identify as like breadcrumbing and ghosting and stuff, and like just coming back when he's horny kind of thing. I don't know. That whole storyline, I hated Anthony because of that too.
Well, I mean, the storyline resolved in the best boss way possible. At the end of the series, she says, look, nobody out here is going to take care of me but me. So she finds another guy, and he shows up to her house with flowers in hand, and he opens the door, and she got her new man there, halfway dressed.
Yeah.
And, so I can't help but stand. And I kind of think that was the perfect resolution to that, because under no circumstances was he ever going to be able to formally claim her and give her the life that she deserves, right? So it was more or less like this was the only outcome, and I'm glad that she got the courage to do it, rather than be this guy's side piece forever, watch him get married to someone else, and then, just be like kind of in the shadows. She went out and she's like, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to be with someone who can claim me and love me fully, and not this half-assed nonsense.
Yeah, like the resolution of her story was so FDS. It was like, this guy's stringing me along, isn't going to be able to commit to me, so I'm just going to like level up and just pick a different guy who can provide those things for me, and ended up having, a positive resolution of her story. So I was 100% on the side of the opera singer. Anthony was being the shitty fuckboy in this.
Yeah. Even though she was enjoying it in the moment, there was no long-term potential there. So I think her recognizing that and then advocating for herself. So like when you see these women advocate for themselves in a real way, it's really great to see that in a show like that and feel like it has FDS themes versus the fake advocacy that the fake clueless self-advocacy of Daphne, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like she was more, she was like, had a smarter version of self. I mean, granted, like an opera singer would have had been more exposed to the realities of the world than, some rich, 18-year-old girl.
We hope 18. Did they say how old they are?
I think that when women were presented to the court, they were usually between the ages of like, I think, they were like 16, 17, 18, 19-ish. Here's the other thing to remember about Regency. I'm pretty sure this is true, where as a woman, if you had like 3 seasons and you weren't married, you were considered a spinster. So like the social season is like, the season where they're trying to get together to like find who to marry or whatever, right? So if a woman has 3 seasons and she hasn't been married, she's a spinster. But the men have like an infinite amount of time to to figure it out, right? There's no time limit for men like there are for women, which is such fucking bullshit. Because when you have that like sense of urgency for women, you could have the most beautiful, amazing woman ever, and even low value men will feel confident to just like lean back and be like, oh, I got all the time in the world kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember reading actually, like even like Jackie Kennedy, she met JFK when she was 22 and she was already deemed too old for marriage, in quotation marks. It was wild.
In those days, it was like you wanted to marry a woman when she was young because then you could mold her to be like your perfect sex object.
Well, I mean, JFK was still, we should do an episode on JFK, but he was still a massive disrespectful fuckboy to Jackie.
Oh, yeah.
Low value LVP, low value president.
Yeah.
Right?
LVP. Yeah.
Aren't they all kind of low value? Have we had a high value president? I mean, I guess Obama is probably the closest in recent memory.
I don't know, probably Lincoln is the only one I can think of off the top of my head who's like probably a decent person.
Yeah, no, we should do that. Low value president. Okay, so what was your favorite character to love or to hate? Savannah.
I'd probably say Anthony as well, just because I just found his entire attitude really, really gross. And I found it was very, it was almost like, I'm not going to say Jekyll and Hyde, but he almost like knew how he wanted his sister to be treated, right? And we see this all the time with men. They'll be overprotective of their sisters, but then they'll go out and treat other women like trash. I don't understand that. It's not somebody who has any amount of integrity, there. And also Daphne was just generally quite annoying. In the sense that she thought that she knew more than she did. And even though she's, clearly quite intelligent, she doesn't use that intelligence in any way that's actually beneficial to her or to her situation. I wasn't a fan of the Bridgerton family at all, to be honest, at all. I did actually prefer the Featherington, like even the daughters. I found them a bit more, even though they could be a bit, I don't know, pompous and prissy, but I found them a bit more likable. There was something about them that was really likable. And Anthony was definitely, and I'm really, because I actually hadn't got that far in the series, but I'm really, really glad it had that resolution, that he didn't end up with the perennial side piece, as was often the case in those times, because it was super common for especially rich young men to have mistresses throughout their marriages as well. So I'm really glad she realized her worth and thought, nah, I'm out.
She dumps him. She levels up.
Yeah, he was disgusting, quite frankly.
So Duke of Hastings, he's been the breakout star of the show. He's been the actor who basically all the women are swooning over. And while I find him, I know mentally he's physically attractive, his character is such a fuckboy that I immediately was turned off by him. And I couldn't even find him sexually attractive in the show. And it was from the first moment he's on scene where Daphne's trying to escape Burbrook, the bridge troll, and she bumps into the Duke, and she's trying to obviously like make small talk so the bridge troll doesn't waddle himself over to her and keep mouth breathing on her anymore. So she's like, what is your name, sir? Like very earnestly polite question. And then the Duke's like, don't you know who I am? Like he comes off the bat with like this attitude. And I was just like, you could have just faked a little politeness in that moment. And the fact that he couldn't just even do it for like 3 seconds to me was so, I actually thought he was more low value in my opinion than even Anthony. I know they were going to give him a redeeming character arc, but like his whole attitude from the beginning was like, I don't want to be here. I don't like these people. And at the same time, very arrogant.
Yeah, he's basically like an emo. He's an emo kid, right? Like he's just sitting there like, well, like my dad didn't understand me and I have unresolved childhood trauma and I'm so sad and moody, blah, blah, blah. I hate guys like that, honestly. Like there's someone who find that type of man attractive, I guess. I just find them to be like emotional vampires. They're just unbearable to be around.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is emotionally vampiric. And I'm like, and that's why as soon as he would get on the screen, my vagina would dry up like the Sahara.
And also all of their sex scenes, I did not enjoy any of their sex scenes. I'm sorry. They were just like so gratuitous. Like, I like a good sex scene in a good movie. Like, when it's done well, I can enjoy, like, a sex scene in a movie, right? But for them, it was just like...
It was awkward because she looks so young to me, too. I guess they never say their age, but I'm like, she's really supposed to be like 15, 16.
Yeah, she looks a lot younger than him. She looks like a good 10, 15 years younger than him. So all of their sex scenes, I don't know. I just feel like I'm watching child porn. It just is deeply upsetting.
Yeah, so it was the combination of his emo kid attitude. It was a combination of her looking really young and innocent and pretty clueless about everything. And then he's obviously been around the block. And it's supposed to be kind of a sexy dynamic, but instead it just came across a little weird in the sex scenes. Although I did kind of like the scenes where they had some touching emotional intimacy moments. But it always came across to me more like their relationship, even when they were supposed to be hotly, passionately in love, still came across to me as a friendship more than, or like a lovesick girl really in love with this guy who can't really emotionally be there for her fully. And it gave me more friend energy than like a relationship between equal partners.
Yeah. Like the whole premise of their romance, quote unquote romance, with the whole like, oh, I'm going to pretend to be into you so that other guys get jealous and then will want you more and all that. Like, I just didn't buy that. Like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it makes sense actually, like, because FDS, we talk about mate guarding and stuff and how men are competitive.
Oh yeah, that's a good example then. That's actually a good example of one of the principles in the handbook, which was, hey, go to a place where you're likely to encounter mate competition, because that is a real thing with men.
Yeah, like men will see another high value man desiring something. And then that's the other thing. Men are very like, they'll copy what they consider to be like alpha. Like if they see like an alpha or whatever, I don't know, I hate the term like alpha, beta, or whatever, but you know, men tend to idolize certain types of men and then will copy them, right? So if the Duke of Hastings is the so-called alpha in the situation, he's going for Daphne. The idea then is like, oh, then all the other guys are going to copy him and try to get Daphne or whatever. But the whole premise of it just bothered me. It was stupid.
It's hard to stand their romance when the entire relationship started on deception, but an additional deception on the part of the Duke of Hastings about being able to have a child. And then Daphne signing up for that when she could have had the prince, by the way, who the prince to me was way more like emotionally engaging and way more genuine and like securely attached that she could have been with. But instead she chooses this guy who is all over the place, right? And doesn't even want kids. And she knows she wants a family. So there's so many self-sabotaging decisions in there, in places where she should have did better.
I'm so tired of stories where the heroine or whatever is going after like the emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, worse option, right? Like the whole Edward versus what's the other guy's name? Jacob, right? Like the werewolf guy versus the vampire guy. I always like the werewolf guy more, okay? Like he seemed like better relationship material.
From Twilight, yeah.
Basically, yeah, I'm so done of the trope of like the girl goes for like the worst option. Like, why? Like, why would you do that? Why not just go for the one who's clearly better?
I guess because they need to fill up story time.
Yeah, if they just find like a perfect guy and marry him, like there's no melodrama, right? So when they're going for the guy who's worse, I guess there's more drama. But okay, the whole scene with the duel, okay. That scene made me so angry because like they're about to shoot each other and she's like, no, like if you know, you have to marry me or else my reputation is ruined. And then he still says no. It's like, sis, he literally said he would rather die than marry you, okay? Like
what is she not understanding in this situation?
Like he said over and over again that he does not want to marry her. He would literally rather die. And she's just, and then she's like, oh no, there's no need to continue. Like we're to be married anyways. It's like, bitch, that's not what he fucking said. Okay. He just said no.
Yeah. She kind of, no means no, Daphne.
Exactly.
Like she needed to have accepted that and taken that L and really, again, advocated for herself. And well, she kind of fake advocates for herself when she thinks the Duke isn't coming around. So she goes and like flirts with the prince. And then the Duke of Hastings gets all in his feelings. But I'm like, you're supposed to leave him in his feelings. You're not supposed to do it just so he'll come back and get more jealous and you'll go back to him anyways. Otherwise, you kind of defeat the purpose, right?
Yeah. The whole like, oh, I'm going to like, he's being off and on, so I'm going to like make him jealous by I'm going to flirt with another guy and that'll make him want me or whatever. Like, okay, cool. Like he's going to want you for what, 5 minutes? But then you have to marry him and somehow be in a relationship with this person for years. And you think that that moment of jealousy is going to save that? No, that's not the foundation for a lasting relationship, Daphne.
Yeah, he's kind of a low value man all around. But I do think there's one guy on the show who, at least from my initial impressions, was high value, which is Will the boxer. If you remember, he was the boxing partner of...
Oh, yeah, of the Duke's boxing partner.
Of the Duke,
coach,
right.
I think, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, his coach. And he was also being sponsored monetarily by the Duke as a fighter. So Lord Featherington creates a bet where he bets against Will the boxer. And then he goes to Will the boxer and he says, if you throw this match, then I'll give you half my earnings. And Will the boxer, you know, his ego gets in the way and his honor gets in the way. But then he looks at the practical reality of, hey, I'm getting slower, I'm aging, and I need to take care of my family. I like the whole arc where you see him kind of put his pride aside to think about the future of his children and his wife.
All the scenes with his wife and kids was so cute and wholesome. Like, that just made me... That was like the only healthy relationship, or one of the only healthy relationships in the whole show.
Right. And they gave him a complicated choice, but they kind of showed how he's a guy of great integrity and a guy of great honor, right? But he goes and does something that he knows is not the most integritous, but he does it for the most altruistic of reasons, right? So complicated guy who makes complicated decisions, but still kind of prioritizes the correct part of his life, right? Because I think it would have been a little bit different if it was like, I'm going to keep fighting as long as my body can do it, knowing he's going to break down and then not afford to feed his family. His ego would get in the way.
Yeah, like the idea that of a man being able to set aside their ego and do the right thing, or do the right thing for his family, I think that's an admirable trait. I agree. That
gave me like zaddy energy, right? Versus the Duke, where I know they were trying to make him the sexy love interest. And I was more like, what? Let's find out more about Will the boxer.
I also want to talk about the childhood trauma that the Duke went through. Because I think Will the boxer is a good foil for the Duke. Like, Will the boxer is willing to put aside his ego, do the right thing for his family. And the Duke of Hastings is the opposite of that. He is like, no, I made this promise to my father that I would never marry, never have kids, and this line would die with me. And then, yeah, he does change his mind eventually in the end. But he definitely, like, you know, Daphne even calls him out for living his life for someone who's dead and not living his life for himself.
Right. So he makes an ego play. He makes an ego play and he's self-sabotaging his own life and his potential for happiness for a dead man.
Yeah. And like, why would you... I don't understand people who do this sort of like self-sabotaging, like inflicting suffering on themselves and others around them just to spite someone else who hurt them. You know, yeah, your dad was shitty. Yeah, that was traumatizing. But like, your dad's dead now. You're the new Duke. Now you can live life on your terms the way that you want it, right? I don't understand people who like hurt themselves.
I mean, it's not rational, but it's real, right? People do that all the time. It doesn't make rational sense. It's an emotional thing with people. I will say, I wish they had like fleshed it out a little bit more, because they basically say he doesn't want to have kids because of his anger against his father. But in the books, I found out that it's a little bit more complicated than that, not by much, but basically because he had a speech impediment, he was afraid of having a child that would have a speech impediment and be treated badly. So they didn't really say that in the show, which made, I think, the Duke's aversion to children come across a lot more one-dimensional and selfish. But the book, I guess, does a better job of fleshing out his motivations. So some of that, I want to say, might be the show writing of not making him very sympathetic about that. But if it was like truly just, I'm super mad at my daddy, so I'm never doing this, yeah, he needs to grow the hell up. But this might have been fan fiction, but the other person was saying, well, yeah, women died during childbirth. Maybe it was also a desire not for his wife to die to bring a child into the world, but that's never stated. So then you just come across this his statement and you take it at face value and you're like, wow, this guy really sucks and he needs to like get over him.
Yeah, like I almost wish the show made it so that, oh, like his mother died during childbirth. He doesn't want to do that to like a woman that he loves, right? So I would actually find him way more sympathetic if he'd said something like that. Oh, and one last thing. I want to talk about how like the scenes where the Duke of Hastings' dad was like yelling at him. It was like, damn, like calm down. Like you're like his son stutters like once and he's like, my son is an imbecile. It's like, bro, chill.
I have sired a failure.
Like it's just so over. I mean, I do know people who have parents like that who are legitimately so emotionally abusive that, you know, everything the child does is wrong. And it like, from an outside perspective, it almost seems over the top, but for someone who's experienced like parental abuse, it's not over the top and it's very real. So
I think it was one of those conditions that were very, very misunderstood. And because it was so, I'm not sure if anyone here has seen the King's Speech, for example, but because it was so misunderstood, people just literally thought at the time, they still do now to some extent, but if somebody had a stutter, you were literally an imbecile. I mean, back then, and I suppose even now, there isn't anywhere near enough research that's been done into the condition. They don't know what causes it, how it happens, and it's effectively untreatable, right? So I guess the father's outburst, whilst it seems over the top, in that context, when you have a condition that you don't know where it's come from, so they're not sure if it's genetic or how to treat it, again, this isn't really excusing it at all, because it's especially, for the person who has it, it's very mentally distressing. It can seem like the worst thing in the world. And especially back then as well, if we look at the context, I guess, the Duke was going to be the heir to his father. They had to be perfect, essentially. If there was any, form of, defect, it'll be deeply undesirable. And something like a stutter you can't really hide as well. If a guy is somewhat short, he can make up for it in other ways by having money, as my mother always said. Because her dad was 5 foot, and my grandmother was 5'9", so she was like, yeah, his money made up for the extra 10 inches. but they usually don't have money anyway. Right. But anyway, that's an aside. But if it's the way you speak, that's the only way you really communicate with the world, right? Yeah. So I did feel that on a personal level. I felt like, yeah, that's tough. That is really tough. That's like the only time I felt sorry for him, though, in the whole series. After that, I was like, you're a dick. Besides that,
I liked how Lady Danbury, I wish they had fleshed out her character a little bit more. I'm hoping they do that in later seasons, but I like them having this kind of strong maternal figure, because at first she's almost like just there to make wisecracks, but then you see her relationship with the Duke and you kind of soften towards her and understand, like, she's very kind-hearted and she works with him and helps him grow into the person he is there. So I kind of feel like, her character during that whole thing, it was an interesting arc for her as well.
I loved Lady Danbury. That's another character that I would say is like in my favorite. Like, I loved the strong female characters. Yeah, Lady Featherington, Lady Danbury, the Queen Charlotte. Yeah, Queen Charlotte also, even though she's kind of like...
Oh, yeah, I loved Queen Charlotte. She was so petty, but I loved it. I don't know why. I loved her messiness.
Yeah, she loved, like, the gossip column, right? So I'm, like, kind of relatable. But, and it's so interesting because the real Queen Charlotte, who's married to George III, like, he was insane for the last, 10 years, something like that, of their marriage. I don't know exactly how long, but she was thought to be, like, the first black queen, like, quote unquote black queen, because she was descended from, like, the Portuguese, like, what is it? They had some Moorish ancestry. So I just find that, like, a very good, like, historical kind of reference there.
Good stuff.
Oh, and one last thing I wanted to bring up. So I watched a video by The Take about Bridgerton, and before I watched The Take's take on it, I really didn't like Bridgerton, but once I saw The Take talk about it, I really liked it. They basically talk about how Bridgerton is like a show about today. Like, it's not meant to be something necessarily like a historically accurate period piece. It's supposed to be an allegory of today. And like the whistle down stuff is supposed to represent like social media and how your reputation is dependent on others, and it's very important. It could like go wrong at, you know, a moment's notice and that sort of thing. And the idea that I liked the most from it was the idea that masculinity, they're living in a world where masculinity is in decline and femininity is on the rise. Like, you see that in a lot of the male characters, they're weak. Like the gambling guy, right? Anthony is like obsessive and shitty, right? Like, the men all kind of suck in this story, and the women mostly are pretty awesome and are in a much stronger position. And so I think the idea of looking at it through the lens of what is it saying about nowadays, like in these sort of turbulent times in which men are declining as a class and women are ascending as a class. So I thought that was an interpretation that I really enjoyed. That's what made me actually like Bridgerton in the end.
And thusly, we have reached the completion of our program. Please navigate to the World Wide Web and visit our website at thefemaledatingstrategy.com. And we humbly request that you support our Patreon at patreon.com/thefemaledatingstrategy. Thank you for listening, queens, and for all you burgeoning Wolfgang Amadeus Scrozots, please perish in a fit of rage. Ta-ta!